not here with us in the room, but is on Zoom. I think we met you a few weeks ago, so we probably don't need to do the reintroductions, but we can go ahead and get started.
Okay, are we ready with the Zoom? Okay, so just for the record, it's Abby White with the Vermont Land Trust, and thank you for having us back. I'm here with two of my colleagues today, one of whom you met a few weeks ago, Al Karnatz, who's our project director in Champlain Valley, and Al has almost 30 years of experience working with ag land conservation, really focused in the Champlain Valley, but he's an expert in the state. And then also very pleased to bring Kara Montgomery, who is our director of stewardship. And Kara has also deep experience at VLT, been here, I think, over 10 years, 16 years. So you have a lot of depth of experience here in the room. And again, I'm Abby White, and really we want to focus our conversation with you today on some of the deeper aspects of ag land conservation. It's really wonderful to follow VHCB because I think they provided a good framework for what conservation looks like throughout the state. And so we're prepared to go a little bit deeper on how we do that work and just hope to be in conversation with you all. So even though we're focused today on ag land, it's also just important to know that Vermont Land Trust works throughout the whole state. We focus on not just protecting land, but ensuring the health of the land after it's been conserved, and also connecting people to the land and really striving to serve every Vermonter, whether they work the land, own hundreds of acres, or might live in a quarter-acre lot or might actually rent. It's really important to us to ensure that every person in Vermont is just connected to the work we do because the impact is far-reaching. So it's farms, it's forests, it's community lands, and it's protection, investing in people in place, and engagement. So if you have other questions kind of about our forest land work or our community work, we're happy to speak to that as well, but we're going to go deep on agriculture. Before I turn it over to my colleagues who are going to cover most of this, I just want to take a moment to thank you all for the memo that you sent to House Appropriations last week in support of full statutory share for VHCB. We wouldn't be able to do this work without them, and the federal match that Gus mentioned before is really important to us as well. I also just want to take a moment. I know you've been talking about H126. You might have heard about that yesterday from Trey Martin, and also just to express our support for that bill. I think it's important to establish that goal and kind of bring the conversation back to conservation. It's been kind of many years since we've had policy of this nature to really kind of shape what the future looks like. And I think this is an opportunity to do that. One thing I'll just note, and perhaps you've talked about this as well, is that in the definitions of that bill, ag land conservation is not currently included as a definition. We think it needs to be. We'll continue to support the bill. Without that, I think that the study that the bill contemplates will could help to address that, and I think it will continue to take shape. But ag land has always been a part of Vermont's landscape. It's always been kind of integrated very much into our way of life and our economy. It's certainly been a big focus of the Vermont Land Trust, and so just really hope to see that included.
Question before you switch seats. When you talk about the Housing Conservation Board appropriation and how critical that is for the work you do, along with the federal match, how do those two, to what extent do they fund the work that you do? And it's probably in the report that you just handed out, but so there was no appropriation for the Vermont Land Trust, or at least it didn't come through our committee. So
correct.
Getting a direct appropriation.
Correct. We don't get a separate direct appropriation. And my colleague Al is going to address this, but we were talking yesterday, like roughly It varies year to year based on VHCB's budget, but say on average, we receive about $3 million from VHCB, and that is matched $3 million from federal money, NRCS, on the ag side. So it's pretty significant.
And then, so that's 6 million out of a total budget of what sort of,
For Vermont Land Trust budget?
right?
Yeah, I mean, again, our total budget varies year to year, and the budget includes like we have a smaller operational budget that can vary between, 5 million and 8 million. But then we see ourselves as really a pass through. So the money that comes from VHCB for purchase of development rights flows through Vermont Land Trust to the landowner. And so that can really vary based on VHCB's appropriation for that particular year.
I'm just trying to get a sense of whether there are other significant sources of funding that also flow through, or whether
Yes.
largely the conservation work you do, the purchase of development rights is the money that we're talking about when we talk about fully funding the housing and conservation.
The other funding that we receive through VHCB is through the community projects, the community lands, town forests, and also some forest land. There's a lot of federal money, so federal forest legacy money that flows into the forest land conservation work as well. The Vermont Land Trust overall receives about a third of its funding through these public sources. A third of our funding is through individual contributions, and then another third is through endowment. We've been, not just today, but going back many years, really needing to grow our endowment, particularly for stewardship, because once we have conserved that land, it's conserved forever. And if we hold the easement, we have an obligation to ensure that, not just kind of the monitoring and the compliance with that easement, but additional services to landowners to really help improve the health of their land. And so we have several staff that are fully devoted to that.
Good, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. Okay, so you can both come on up.
They're antacids.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Is that a clue that you came up
Yes.
here and now you're passing out the
Yes,
antacids?
we like some antacids.
I thought it was a hard candy.
Yeah,
I buy them in bulk and put them in here.
Al's here and we need antacids. Anyway, thanks for having me back. Abby, I think you mostly kind of covered a lot of what I was going to cover. And Gus, you probably have those numbers right at the top of your tongue in terms of how much VHCB provides. It's really I feel like I work for VHCB as much as I work for VLT, in that I work with their staff very closely, almost daily. And it's our bread and butter in terms of farmland conservation around the state, but it's also very highly leveraged. We do our own local fundraising. We just did a project, as you know, in Stowe on the Ricketson farm. And, the Stowe Land Trust, which is our partners, they raised $1 million locally that also leveraged the federal and the state money. So there's a huge amount of leverage that is involved in the mix of these projects. I mean, Stowe was like the gold standard. Go ahead, yeah.
David, Chairman Durfee, to your question earlier, partnerships is what makes success. And I've worked on 15 projects, 8 or 10 projects in the last 15 years with Vermont Land Trust, with VHCB, Stowe Land Trust, Trust for Public Lands, and the public and other benefactors that make all these projects work. It isn't one organization. And I did submit and sponsor that bill to fully fund VHCB. So I get it, but it's really the collaboration of partnerships that makes this whole thing achieve its goals.
Yeah, thank you for that. And as you say, there's a Charlotte Land Trust, there's a South Hero Land Trust, there's a Middlebury Land Trust, and we all work in partnership. So it's a pretty dynamic
Where's that Highgate land
partnership.
trust?
Yeah, we don't have anything in Highgate, but we could. So, I think my quick point is to answer your questions rather than go by my notes and my script. I mean, we were touching on a couple of questions that I thought we wanted to dive deeper on. And that's why Kara is here to really talk about our stewardship role and what happens when farms are conserved. And just as a backdrop to that, really, my role is to really bring these projects to VHCB for funding and to decide which projects are really are the highest priorities. Because as I probably mentioned last time, I don't really prospect or knock on doors. There's plenty of projects coming at me. It's my job to really figure out, okay, which ones are the priorities? And then I'll bring projects to VHCB. It's protected, it's conserved forever. It's a permanent easement, and it's got a lot of other strings that I think Kara can talk about in terms of water quality that we're doing on farms. But once it's a protected piece of land, it becomes into our stewardship realm where Kara is really managing all the stewardship properties around the state. So there's a whole different level of checking in with landowners over that course of time. But again, my role is to figure out, okay, is this a piece of land that's really going to be a good piece of agricultural land? I tell landowners this all the time, that this is not necessarily about scenic views. And it's not necessarily about what's the highest development potential that enters into it, but it's really about what's the best agricultural resource here. We want these lands to be available for agriculture long into the future. So that's, for me, that's my personal priority, is to determine, is this a farm? And we're doing a lot of farm transfers now, and that kind of enters into my psyche. But one of the things I think that Kara's going to touch on is, we talked about what happens when a farm comes up for resale. I think we left that, maybe that was your question. Like we have this acronym, and I'll let Kara take it from here. But anyway, I'll just leave it at that. And we're here to answer your questions. So, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As Abby mentioned, I'm Kara Montgomery. I'm the stewardship director at Vermont Land Trust. We have about 13 staff that do stewardship throughout the state. We have 2,200 easements to steward, roughly right now. So certainly a lot of work. And as Al mentioned, like, conservation is not just conserving the land, it's then stewarding it. Being in relationship with landowners. A huge part of our goals in stewardship is to build relationships with those landowners who we have to work with in perpetuity forever, and then the next landowner after them, and the next landowner after them. So a big part of our program is to be in communication with those landowners, be on the ground with them, answering their questions, helping them get to the right technical resource that they need to get to, connecting them with financial resources as well. And by doing that, I think we really keep our level of violations very, very low. So that's why we do it. And also because it brings us great joy.
Representative Love.
Yeah.
I'm advocating for a farmer right now who has land conserved through the Vermont Land Trust. They want to build a house, and they have been denied through the land trust to subdivide 2 acres out. Is there a remedy for that? Because currently they're living in what I would call severely substandard housing in a trailer.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just curious, can you walk me through sort of what happens when a farmer conserves land? It's not contiguous because some of it's across the street, but they just want to build out 2 acres for a house site. And I'm just trying to learn more sort of how to help them. And this is not the first time a farmer has approached me and said, how do I do this?
Yeah, and I absolutely know the farm you're talking about because we've been working with them on this housing issue for a long, long time.
Yeah, and they keep getting denied every time they turn around. So
They have a house, right? The problem is the financing for it that they're up against with. I mean, I don't want to get too in the weeds, but
right.
With the lenders, because lenders won't they haven't built enough equity. It's a very complicated, they don't have
Okay.
enough equity to get enough lending to build the house they have the right for.
Let's not go.
Okay, I was just trying, I guess my larger picture was if someone conserves land through the Vermont Land Trust and they conserve their whole farm and then they want to build out 2 acres, is that something that is easy to do or is that not easy to do? I guess that's rather than keep it specific.
Yes.
Let's be general.
So the conservation easement is forever. The deal that we do at the time of conservation is the deal that we have to live with forever.
Got it.
If that conservation easement does not exclude land, we cannot exclude land later. That is unconserving land, which we just cannot do. Obviously, that's part of
Okay.
why we're stewarding the easement the way it is. There's a certain number of housing rights that gets decided upon, and the appraisal takes that into consideration. That's how much they get paid for the conservation easement at
Okay.
the beginning of conservation, and then that's what we have to live with.
Got it. Okay. Thank you. That's the clarification I needed.
Sure.
Excellent.
But we are working on that situation, so don't,
Okay.
more on that with you whenever.
Yes.
It's helpful to understand, I think. So in general, once land is conserved, it's a permanent situation. And this has come up in the conversations that we've been having about other bills and what does it mean to conserve permanently versus, for example, put something in current use where you pay a penalty to get out, but you can get out.
And then,
Thank you, because that was gonna be my follow-up.
Quite different than current use.
Very
So you
different.
can't back out of that. You can't just pull out 2 acres for a home site. So it's all of that land is permanently conserved.
yes.
Got it. Okay.
We, and I'll say about this, that over the years, what we've strove to do is to create the most flexibility in the way we write our conservation easements, to consider things like farm labor housing, to consider making 2 farms out of a large farm, if there was a good plan for that. But we live with a lot of easements that have old language, and we cannot change that. So
Right,
that
okay.
is what our stewardship program strives for, is to create the most flexibility that we can within the confines of what we've written down for our landowners. We absolutely don't want to cause strife. We want farmers to succeed.
Right.
So
But no, that's really good for me to know that it's that stringent. And I
it
think,
is.
okay.
Representative Lipsky.
Yeah, I had a great experience with a Long Winter Farm. And I know Al was involved, there was another person named Ramsey.
John
Ramsey.
Right, he was the,
And it was a young farm couple. And there were a very specific plot on that parcel where they could build a home. And there was a very stringent restriction on what size home. It couldn't be a McMansion that if they went out of business, it had a very specific location and value. So my recommendation, not just to BLT, but to anyone with constituents, make sure those long-term goals are negotiated and spoken about and communicated during the process, because once the ink dries, that's permanent.
Agreed. Which is like why we talk a lot to each other. Like, I'm on the back end, I see all of these things playing out with landowners in the state. Al's on the front end making the deal. And so we're talking so that we can do better in the conservation design in the beginning. And that being said, I don't know if you want to get into your resale question, but I might as well just dive in.
sure.
Our conservation easements these days have a purchase right. It's called the option to purchase at agricultural value. I'll just refresh if you got into it last time, I don't know.
Just barely.
Okay. What that says is that the landowner can sell their farm to a qualified farmer, meaning someone who makes more than 50% of their income from farming. And our purchase rights are not triggered. So they can just do that sale. That sale can just happen. So farmer to farmer, is a sale that happens without triggering the acronym is OPAV. And if someone who is a non-qualified farmer, this is by IRS standards, then our OPAV is triggered, and we have the option to consider purchasing that farm at its agricultural value or waiving the OPAV for that sale. The OPAV is forever. It comes up at every sale. So if we waive for one sale, we still have the opportunity down the road to exercise our OPAV in the next sale or any subsequent sale. It's in perpetuity for every sale. So it's quite it's a tool that we put in place to try to help with affordability of farms. And I think we started in putting 2007.
Yeah, around 2005.
Six is the first ones. Before that, in all of our conservation easements, we have a right of first refusal, which basically is just a straight up right of first refusal. We have 90 days to match the sale price of the purchase and sale agreement if we so choose to. And that's it. And or we waive for that sale. So a big difference in monetary value.
Yep.
From a right of first refusal. An OPAV has a certain monetary value associated with it that the farmer gets paid upfront when we conserve their farm.
Representative Pearl has a question about this, I think.
I should know this because part of my farm is conserved, but is it triggered by sale only, or how does it work with transfer? Like inherit, if
Within family, you mean?
Yeah, if I was to pass away and my children were not farmers.
Sure.
How does that?
I should have said family transfers are also exempt. So they do not trigger our OPAV or right of first refusals on most farms. I think family are always, I've never seen an easement that family wasn't exempt for a sale or a transfer to. So that is also true. Yeah.
Representative Rice?
So there's a monetary value associated with it at the time of signing.
Yeah.
Is there an associated, is the price for which you will buy the farm if you choose to enact your OPAV set at the time of signing, or is that based on market or?
It is. There's a number that we put in the easement. Maybe you could talk more about
Right,
that.
we asked the appraiser to say, what's the value of the property of just the land, not the buildings? Because buildings can improve or they can depreciate in value. So, but yeah, at the time of signing the easement of conveying the development rights, there's a number in there that could be, $500,000 for just the land only. But that number, and I should let Kara take it from here, but that number is not necessarily fixed because it may be 10 years from now,
Right.
when a sale happens.
So, yeah, the
The
language.
appraiser would, go ahead.
The language says we, the purchase price is this plus inflation and improvements, or we get an appraiser to tell us how much it is. Usually it would be the latter because things change. It could be 20 years later. So, the other thing, that we've started doing on the stewardship end in our program is what we call conservation 2.0. And it's really the kind of future of this large portfolio of conserved lands that have all these older easements that don't have OPAVs. There's no water quality protections. All of our new easements, we assess what is needed for, buffers on rivers or wetland protection areas. So nowadays we've found a way to kind of go back, and we call it a retro OPAV, which is purchase the OPAV and amend the easement to remove the right of first refusal and place the OPAV on the farm, and be able to pay the landowner for that. And VHCB funds 2-3 a year, 2 to 3 for us to be able to do that work. And that is usually a point of time which helps facilitate a farm transfer to the next generation because it's bringing in some money, or to a new farmer with a new farm plan or something for that farm in transition. So we consider really important work for farm transfers to new farmers and next generation farmers, and also to continue our work to try to keep farms affordable throughout the state.
How common are transfers? conserved farmland properties?
How many transfers do we have a year? Do you have that
Yeah.
number off the top
I
of your
don't,
head?
I mean, there's lots of transfers. I mean, our portfolio is very large. The farmland part of it is a certain portion of it. We have a lot of transfers of our donated easement lands that happen every year. The farm lands, I would say, coming through, gosh, we've had like a lot of ups and downs recently. I could say last couple of years, there's been a lot of consolidation of some sort of small dairy farmers kind of getting out and selling to the larger dairy farms in the area. You know, and those transfers just happen because it's farmer to farmer. So most of our rights, unless it's a right of first refusal, don't get triggered, but we always waive our rights for sale to a farmer.
In my projects, like the upfront projects, I would say these days, it's close to half of the projects that I'm working on, between a third and a half, have some transfer involved. Where it could be a generational transfer, or it could be a new farm purchase, you know, like we recently did one in Moncton a few years ago, you know, where we're trying to place, you know, farmers on land. And so we have a whole network, or what we call farmland access, that we're placing. And on rare occasion, I don't know, we want to get into this, we'll actually purchase a farm, or have over the course of the years stepped in when a farm is really at risk and the landowner can't wait 2 years, which is typically what it takes to get through the VHCB and the federal process. It's at least 2 years.
Yeah.
And if we come up with a key piece and the landowner says, I'll give you 6 months. I'll say, well, we can't turn it around in 6 months. Well, I'll give you 6 months to buy it then. And on occasion, we've stepped in to do that. Anyway.
Yeah, and to be clear, like buy an unconserved farm, the at risk, like Vermont Land Trust, then put a request for proposal for farmers, get a farmer, conserve the land, reduce the price for them, get them on there. That's the kind of work that I was talking about. And we're limited on how much we can do of that, but we do it.
We've got about 5 minutes, so I'm gonna, and I see 3 hands up here.
All right. We'll come back again? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, we may, we're up to 4 hands, so Representative Gray, I'm gonna let you go first.
So what if a farm is leased to another farm and then all of a sudden this transfer happens? Farm that was leasing the farm was just shut out of the process.
Yeah, I mean,
Anybody ever considered what effects that have?
I can say, yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. We don't typically get in the middle of farmers who are leasing to other farmers or selling to other farmers. Our easement specifically is like, we're trying to get out of the way for farmers to transfer their farms to other farmers. So I don't know that we would get involved in that kind of situation. It seems like a bad situation, but.
It would be nice if somebody notified that this was happening, so I could have found, well, I did find it in the land, but.
Oh, yeah, I mean, say get a contract, you know.
Representative Templeman.
So with increasing land values, I can imagine that the amount of money you need to put out for development rights has increased. Has your pool of money increased to keep up with that?
I would say no.
No, it
Not
hasn't.
the federal amount or the VHCB piece. We certainly work, you know, with Gus and his team on that. But yeah, it's a priority process for us. But definitely, you're right. The appraisals have kicked up hugely over the last couple of years since COVID, really.
Particularly in the last couple of years.
When you're saying priority, then that means that there are farms who don't get.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
Representative Rice.
So the question that I
Right.
for the last time, just so we don't have to punt it to a third time. It's just when your option is triggered and you're deciding whether or not you're going to invoke it in person.
I'm glad we're getting
What goes
there,
into
right?
that decision? How do you determine priorities, and how do you say we're not going to, we're going to let this one go or not?
Sure, it's really complicated.
That's what I heard last time.
Yeah, I can get into a little bit more. So first off, we have an internal discussion with our farmland access director, me, and the director of farmland conservation, and we say, okay, what are the assets of this farm? Are we concerned this new buyer is not going to farm it? Number one. Is it at risk of becoming sort of grown up to weeds or something like that? And that's like a big red flag of maybe we should consider exercising. The next thing we think about is there a qualified farmer who wants this land, who wants to buy this land that either we know of or that we can reach out and kind of put our feelers out and see what the market is, because we don't want to purchase the farm and then have no farmer want it in the immediate. That could change down the road in the next sale. So we always have another opportunity, which is what we keep in the back of our minds if we let a farm go to a non-farmer. In this instance, we asked for a farm plan from them. We're kind of looking at the legitimacy of their farm plan as far as numbers, or if they're kind of making some stuff up or giving us a couple sentences that we usually press them to go through farm viability. And there's a lot of other considerations of do we have the funds to do this right now? And if it's a truly at-risk farm, we find them, we do it. And a lot of times even our threat of exercising gets the seller to find a new buyer that's a farmer.
Do you have a number, percentage-wise, generally, how many you end up?
We've fully exercised on, I think, 3.
Okay.
Pretty small.
We've threatened or started proceedings on more than that, 3 more than that or 4 more than that.
And we have 30 days, right? A 30-day window to decide.
I mean, our goal is to really educate landowners about what the OPAV means and head this off before it gets to that point. And also to be helpful, do you need us to help you find a farm buyer? Let's put it out to our farm seeker list. Let's put it on the ag website, the farm link, Vermont Farm Link or whatever, and head it off before it gets to, here's the purchase and sale. And we're we have a really big problem with this buyer. So that's hopefully got to.
I can give you one quick example, the one that I was probably most involved with, property in Addison County, where it was up for sale. We had an OPAV on it. I think it came through Kara or other people at the time, and the buyer, not to disparage attorneys from Washington, D.C., but that was the buyer, unknown to us, and was going to pay probably more than what the property was worth, based even on the number in our easement. And we said, tell us more, who is this buyer? And but we knew of another farmer in Weybridge that had a cash, dairy operation. He was basically buying all his feed in. He needed land. He would have been interested in buying it, but he wasn't there at the time. So we stepped in and exercised our option. And as it turned, we took ownership of it. Our plan, as you've heard, we only do it on a few projects, but we took ownership of it, and then we transferred it over to this other farmer from Weybridge. He was delighted, and it's all kept in production. I mean, the buyer was maybe going to rent it out, maybe not. That wasn't of a concern, the original buyer. So we felt like this was a farm that we might want to step in on.
It's a very good resource on that farm.
Yeah, exactly, and it kept the farm affordable. We actually bought it for less than what the buyer from Washington was willing to pay.
Mm-hmm. So Representative O'Brien has been patiently waiting remotely. He's over your shoulder, but he's look straight ahead at the camera. He'll see you. And then we'll, I think, have to wrap it up for today. But look forward to hopefully having you back for more of this kind of conversation. But John, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a question about, well, hopefully I'll learn more about what's happening in my very backyard. There was an at-risk farm in Tunbridge, an old dairy farm, and the current dairy farmer had to go out of business quickly. Vermont Land Trust, and I'm sure VHCB, purchased the farm, and now it's called the White River Land Collaborative, a community-based farming operation has taken over some of it. Some of the farm is going to be a solar installation. And then I just learned at town meeting from one of our listers that part of it has been set aside for indigenous peoples' use. And so I wondered if you know the property, if you could speak to that, or more generally, if this sort of policy is happening in other conserved ag land.
I don't know the details of this farm. It's kind of housed in our lands program. The indigenous rights, I think you're talking about that we're just saying an acknowledgement that indigenous people can use this land for hunting, fishing, recreating. I'm not sure.
I know, I can just say briefly. So yes, this is the Chapman Farm, and Vermont Land Trust owns this farm right now. And the White River Land Collaborative is a 501c3 community-based organization that has a vision for creating space for multiple farm enterprises on the land. There's one kind of tenant farmer right now, Flying Dog Farm, and they are in the process of raising funds to purchase the farm from VLT. So we're excited about it because it's an example of what alternative ownership could look like on farms, where you have another entity that owns it but leases it to kind of other operations and creates space for community connection. I'm not familiar with the indigenous rights. I do know that one of the partners they're working with is an indigenous woman, and so they're bringing in kind of indigenous, technical or kind of that knowledge in terms of restoration of the land. But yes, this is one of the parcels that we own, and it's part of a kind of a different portfolio of work than we're talking about today.
So as far as indigenous people's access to land, is that something that you've explored with other conserved pieces of property, or specifically sort of farms?
Yes, well, not specifically with farms. I mean, a lot of our easements, most of our easements have public access, what we call dispersed public access, where people can go often for hunting. There might not be trails or signage or any of that. But on farms, it's a little different because of just the nature of the business operation. We do have an internal policy that Kara was just referring to, where we just kind of state very openly and clearly, and we partnered with the tribes on this, that any member of a tribe that's state recognized has the right to gather, forage, engage in kind of indigenous practice on conserved land.
Our owned land.
Community forest.
Our own, yes. Land that we own or has like very clear public access.
Great, thank you.
All right, well, why don't we wrap it there? Thank you. Thank you, Abby, for this morning. Committee, we'll take 6.5 minutes.
Sorry, couldn't hear.